All right, I think we'll get started. Anyone who hasn't joined yet will settle in as we sort of open the show. Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining today's Tech Forum session. My name is Monique Mongeon. I'm the project manager at BookNet Canada, and I work primarily on our sales analytics tools. Welcome to Trendspotting, book subjects on the move in the Canadian market. Before we get started, BookNet Canada acknowledges that its physical office is upon the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat Indigenous peoples, the original nations of the land we call Toronto. BookNet's operations are currently remote, and our staff contributes their work from these traditional territories, as well as those of the Mi'kmaq people from the lands we now call Beaton, Brampton, Guelph, Halifax, and Vaughan. We encourage you to visit the native-land.ca website to learn more about the peoples whose lands you are joining from today. Moreover, BookNet endorses the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada and support an ongoing shift from gatekeeping to space making in the book industry. The book industry has long been an industry of gatekeeping. Anyone who works at any stage of the book supply chain carries a responsibility to serve readers by publishing, promoting, and supplying works that represent the wide extent of human experiences and identities in all of its complicated intersectionality. We at BookNet are committed to working with our partners in the industry as we move toward a framework that supports space making, which ensures that marginalized creators and professionals all have the opportunity to contribute, work, and lead. If you are having trouble with Zoom or have any tech-related questions, please put your questions in the chat, or you can email techforum@booknetcanada.ca. Our team is here to help you. We are providing live ASL and closed captioning for the session. To see the captions, please find the show subtitle button in the Zoom menu at the bottom of your screen. If during the presentation you have any questions for us, please use the Q&A panel found in the bottom menu. Lastly, I would like to remind attendees of the code of conduct. Please do be kind, be inclusive, be respectful of others, including of their privacy. Be aware of your words and actions, and please report any violations of this code to techforum@booknetcanada.ca. Please do not harass speakers, hosts, or attendees or record the sessions. We have zero tolerance policy. Now you can find the entire code of conduct at techforum.booknetcanada.ca/code-of-conduct. Now, let me introduce my co-presenter today, Pavan Ranu. Pavan is a special sales account manager at Ampersand Inc. She has been championing gift lines and looking after special sales in Western Canada since 2019. We are so excited to have you here. Welcome, Pavan.
Thanks, Monique. I'm looking forward to talking about all the current trends and upcoming trends.
Awesome. So we are really excited to talk about trends today. We're going to start with some trends that we talked about in last year's session, and then we'll move forward to what we see sort of forthcoming in the market. We discussed comics and graphic novels last year, and they are still hot this year. Across YA, adult, and juvenile categories, comics and graphic novels are up 22% in 2022 over 2021. It's important to remember that this is growth upon growth from last year. So in 2021, comics and graphic novels were up 35% over 2020. So when we look at 2020 and 2022 and compare those 2 years, 2022 is up 66% over 2020 for comics and graphic novels. That's incredibly significant for a category that is always on the rise. In this graph, we're looking at total comics and graphic novel sales by age range over the last 3 years. So on the left side, we have the adult, in the middle, we have juvenile, and on the right, we have YA. Comics and graphic novels for adults is the biggest selling comics and graphic novels category, and it was up 39% over last year. However, YA comics and graphic novels are seeing huge growth too. While the overall numbers in that category are small, they're increasing rapidly. In 2022, they were up 202% over last year. Really significant growth there. So since that's where we're seeing this huge growth, we wanted to do a deep dive on what's driving that growth in this category. Of course, Alice Oseman's Heartstopper and the Heartstopper Yearbook are huge sellers. The Five Nights at Freddy's series with 4 titles in the top 10 are both based on both video games and a novel tie-in to those video games. The Girl from the Sea is a standalone by Molly Knox Ostertag. And we also have many entries from the Grishaverse graphic novel series by Leigh Bardugo, which are based on her previous trilogies. There's a ton of media tie-in and series crossover action in this category, and a number with young adult romance themes, which leads us really well into our next category we wanted to focus on, which is romance. You really can't talk about 2022 without looking at the performance of romance. Across all age bands, romance titles are up 51% over last year. This is incredible, huge growth for this category. And if we dive in on the percent change over last year by age band, we can see romance in the juvenile categories is down 17%. YA is up 19%, especially on the back of sales of some of the titles I mentioned in the YA comics and graphic novels roundup. And adult romance is up 56%. Pretty significant. And you really can't talk about romance in 2022 without talking about Colleen Hoover, whose titles dominated week after week through much of the year. 5 of the top 10 best-selling titles in all categories in 2022 were by Colleen Hoover. Aside from Colleen Hoover, there are other authors contributing to the romance renaissance. They are Ali Hazelwood, Emily Henry, and Carly Fortune. The best-selling romance titles of 2022 only really tell part of the story, however. We talked a lot in 2021 about Bridgerton and the revival of period and Regency Romance that Netflix series and the books drove through that year. And here we're looking at sales of Regency Romance items, and it shows the impact of a runaway streaming hit on a small category. So the teal bars in this graph show the sales of all Regency Romance items. And the purple bars next to them show the sales of Regency romances that are not part of the Bridgerton series. While Regency had a huge hit on its hands, sales of items outside the sort of runaway bestseller in the category remained mostly flat year over year. So there was a ton of growth in the category, but not at a huge explosion of new titles in this band. But that's not the case with every category in romance. There are a few categories where we're seeing a ton of growth and a ton of new titles. So building on some of the themes we noted in the YA comics and graphic novels category, you can really see the hidden growth story of romance in 2022 is new adult. And new adult romance is sort of the bridge subject between YA romance and adult romance. There's huge growth in the new adult romance category. It's up 120% over last year. And 2021 was up 119% over 2020. So this is somewhere to watch as readers in those YA categories look towards happy and escapist reads, and as they look to kind of graduate up into books in the adult Bizacs. Here we're looking at some of the best-selling new adult romances of 2022. We have entries from Anna Huang, Elle Kennedy, Krista, and Becca Ritchie. In the new adult category, there are a lot of these prolific authors with series. They write lots of books. There's tons of stuff for their readers to kind of move on to and explore. And we really see that sort of series or related titles action in this category. And if romance is about escapist reads, travel is about people planning their literal escape from their everyday life. And so travel has grown quite a bit this year as well. So we know from studies that 28.3% of Canadians were planning international travel in 2022. Some of the most popular destinations for those Canadians were Western Europe, the United States, and Mexico. About the same percentage, around 28%, were planning travel within Canada to other provinces. But did they buy books to plan all of their trips? Sales of travel books are up 23% in 2022 over 2021. Some of the best-selling travel items from 2022 might indicate where Canadians have been off to. Canadian destinations, Newfoundland and Ontario, Portugal, and general world travel titles were all quite popular last year. In the top 100 travel bestsellers, we also saw a lot of maps and road atlases, suggesting that road trips were high on people's to-do lists last year. Pavan, what are you seeing with travel in the gift market?
So travel is definitely up in the gift market, but it does look a bit different than what you would see in the book market. While there isn't a BISAC that fully captures the uptrend of gift product that is related to travel, we're still seeing trends. And some of these trends include travel-friendly games. Travel-friendly games, are also known as on-the-go games, are a popular ask for a lot of people who are returning to travel. And any game that is considered travel-friendly is compact in size. It doesn't weigh too much. They're easy to store and they come with durable storage. So it could be in a box or a bag. It's easy to set up and put away at a moment's notice. And I'm finding that a lot of people are also asking for activity books and sticker books. So anything that would distract your child or anything that would be a form of entertainment for the whole family on the go is something that is key and essential to what people are looking for right now.
Totally makes sense. Some of these games are so cool too. I really want to try Fruits, the card game.
That one definitely looks fun.
So if travel is not maybe the kind of escape you're looking for, perhaps you want to be scared. We're calling this subject the kind of scare subject group. And this is a group of BISACs with similar scary themes. So here we're looking at horror, we're looking at ghost stories, we're looking at Gothic, and all things occult and supernatural. Our group of scare subjects for adults were up 12% in 2022 overall across the group. But I wanted to dive in more specifically on what this group looks like when you break out the individual subjects. When we dive in, we can see that dark fantasy is really the category driving most of the growth here. It's up 83% in 2022 over 2021. Ghost and Gothic BISACs are only up 24%, which is still quite significant, but nothing like what we're seeing in dark fantasy. Horror is up 5%, but occult and supernatural is the only one sort of on the decline, down about 10%. And what we're seeing in dark fantasy is interesting because when we talked about romance and travel, some of these other topics, we were really looking at escapist things. And so what's interesting is that we're seeing this increase in dark fantasy, which is maybe the most escapist of these scary subjects. Pavan, are you seeing anything around people's escapist tendencies around fantasy?
I'm finding that a lot of what is being driven by book talk. So dark fantasy, anything that is in YA. And in the upcoming year, I do see a lot of children's chapter books that have to do with spooky subjects. So I'm thinking, and I have no idea if this is true, that it has a lot to do with the Stranger Things concept. And there's been a lot of spooky stuff on Netflix. So I have a feeling that is a contributing factor.
Yeah, it's about to be scary all the way down for all the age bands. We'll have to see and follow up if that comes true in next year's data. So I wanted to kind of dig in on the dark fantasy bestsellers. Some of the bestsellers in this category included Babel by R.F. Kuang, Court of the Vampire Queen by Katie Robert, The Bone Orchard by Sarah Mueller, Stephen King's Gunslinger, Anne Bishop's Crow Bones and the Queen's Weapons, One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig, and House of Hungers by Alexis Henderson. Really interesting mix of titles here in the dark fantasy category. Lots of interesting stuff happening and tons of that on Book Talk. So if you're interested in your dark fantasy list or how to kind of pull up your dark fantasy backlist, hanging out on TikTok might be the place to learn. I also wanted to kind of highlight the Gothic and Ghost categories, because the interesting thing about these categories is that it's a mix of contemporary titles and classics. So we have Louise Erdrich's The Sentence, we have Mother Thing by Ainsley Hogarth, The Haunting of Hill House and A Visit, both by Shirley Jackson, The Hacienda by Isabel Cana, The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold, The Corner Shop by Lady Asquith, and The House of Footsteps by Matthew West. What's really interesting about this is we have, like I mentioned, that mix. We've got classics, we've got some contemporary classics, and some new titles here too. So Gothic and Ghost is an interesting place to check out for maybe what's happening next. But if these spooky subjects are maybe not quite the type of fear that works for you, perhaps personal finance is the thing that really gives you the chills. Stats Canada reported that 47% of Canadians were planning changes to their personal spending in 2022. But personal finance seems to be top of mind for Canadians, but not a priority in their book shopping. Sales of personal finance titles are down 18% over last year. And looking at the year over year percent change for personal finance, we have 2022 here on the left and 2017 on the right. Things have been generally down over the last 3 years, despite Canadians' growing concern about personal finance. It's really hard to say what might cause this. It could be that Canadians are moving away from relying on books for this information, or it could be that they're having trouble finding titles that speak to them and their needs. So something to watch if you have personal finance on your list for the coming year. So far, looking at 2023, heading into tax time, personal finance subjects are down 29%. So it doesn't look like 2023 so far is shaping up to be a better year for personal finance titles. So now we're going to be looking ahead a bit to trends in the gift market. Pavan, I'm going to let you take this away.
Sure. So before we get started, I thought I'd preface this with a statement that sometimes gift tends to predict book trends. Discussing it with one of my colleagues, and she mentioned that sometimes it takes a while for book to catch up with gift. And if you really want to predict what is trending, gift is usually a little bit ahead of the pack. So one of the trends that we're going to be looking at is zero proof and non-alcoholic. Zero proof and non-alcoholic is something that is being discussed quite a bit at the moment because it's a little more than a trend. It's being seen in the headlines since Canada announced their new alcohol consumption guidelines this past January. It'll be interesting to see how this trend progresses. So definitely will be interesting what the numbers look like next year. Already we're seeing quite a bit of discussion in the media and ways to shift over to zero proof beverages that don't disappoint. And if you visit a restaurant recently, you might have even noticed that they have a zero proof addition to their menus. So Dry January or Sober Curious January is currently ongoing, and it's mainly driven by millennials and Gen Z is what we're finding. So how does this translate to the gift market? We're seeing a lot of fun and elevated recipe books for non-alcoholic beverages. I'm specifically seeing a lot of interest for these titles beyond December, continuing into January. But there also seems to be a movement towards zero proof all year round. Has anyone else tried a espresso fotini or any type of non-alcoholic drink?
Is anyone else getting constant Instagram advertising for zero proof wine? Because I am.
Or even craft cocktails? That seems to be super big right now.
Absolutely. Let us know in the chat. We're curious to hear whether you're seeing these trends too.
And are you enjoying the trend? Ooh, there's like some interesting books for individuals who are pregnant, but we'll be seeing that a lot more next year.
Yes. There's one, what was it called? Pregatinis?
Yeah, pregatinis. That was really interesting. So it's like you don't miss out. Lots of zero proof wine. Yeah. I think Monique was saying that she was seeing a lot of that too.
Tons.
Okay. So on to sustainability. This is a lot of what we're seeing is driven by Gen Z, and sustainability is one of these categories. However, it's important to note that while Gen Z is driving this trend, all generational groups are very concerned and believe eco-friendly products and initiatives are quite important. That being said, the focus here is on actionable and informative titles. So we're taking a look at reducing and zero waste titles. So actionable tips to reducing waste is a consistent theme for current and future titles. Conscious gifting, such as furoshiki gift wrapping, is also another zero waste concept that we've been seeing more of. I know I've personally been seeing it as a sustainable method of gift wrapping. I don't know if anyone else has come across it on Instagram. I'm seeing that a lot of gift box companies are using this method of wrapping. But once again, it's difficult to capture this trend through a BIZAC, but you will see it across multiple platforms such as Instagram or TikTok. The other form of sustainable activity we're seeing is through upcycling and repurposing. So upcycling has to do with taking existing material and creating something new, and repurposing is more like mending and making old new again. So upcycling, thrifting, and repurposing of clothing is a sustainable practice that has been gaining a lot of popularity with Gen Z. I have a feeling that our current economy also has a lot to do with that, but Gen Z is once again ahead of the pack.
I have the great privilege of talking to you all about one of the weirder trends we've noticed in the data over the last couple of years, and that's mushrooms. The plant, not the drug. So in this graph, we are looking at the unit sales for books on mushrooms from 2022 on the left to 2017 on the right. And you can see the percent changes slowly grow. In 2021, sales of books on mushrooms were up 107%. And then we kind of got up on that growth again this year at 3% in 2022. Everyone's into mushrooms. Move over bread. At this stage in the pandemic, we're mushrooms now. And I think, Pavan, you've been seeing a lot of mushroom stuff in the gift world too.
Yep, it's not only in book, it's in gift, and you're seeing it everywhere. It's in games, it's in stationery, it's just everywhere. People are loving it. I'd
love to know if anyone in the chat has like a mushroom motif item in their home. Let us know. Something really interesting about mushrooms is that they're connected to a lot of other like growing trends in other spaces. Pavan, do you want to talk about this?
Sure. Yeah. So mushrooms are everywhere. They're in book, they're in gift, but I'm going to kind of tie it back to that spike in 2021. So why did the spike occur? So to answer this question, Monique and I did a deep dive and discovered that mushrooms are more than a trend. They're technically part of an aesthetic. For anyone wondering what an aesthetic is, Gen Z refers to it as a niche interest. And there are currently 155 aesthetics, which I was surprised to learn. But it's interesting because ironically enough, a few of these aesthetics are trending. And as we discuss some of them, it'll hopefully give some clarity as to why the mushroom trend exists. So once again, aesthetics are niche interests. So here are some examples of niche interests. If you like TV shows and fashion that mirror Bridgerton, then Regency Core is your aesthetic. And if you like baking bread and taking to the country, your aesthetic is cottagecore. And if you know the power of Taylor Swift, then you may recognize how her album Folklore brought cottagecore, and it's darker and more, it's a darker aesthetic. It's known as goblin core, and it brought it to the forefront. Am I saying that Taylor Swift might be behind the rise of mushrooms? I can neither deny nor confirm that, but maybe Monique can answer some of those questions. Over to you, Monique.
Amazing. I love thinking that Taylor Swift has like completely changed the course of aesthetics. I'm going to talk about goblin core. Goblin core is an aesthetic and subculture inspired by the folklore of goblins, centered on the celebration of natural ecosystems, usually considered less beautiful by conventional norms such as soil, animals, and secondhand objects. As part of those natural ecosystems, mushrooms figure prominently. There's been a lot of coverage of goblin core in the media over the last couple of years, and it has really highlighted the prominence of goblin core's love of mushrooms, snails, frogs, and worms. They kind of see it as the gritty counterpoint to 2020 and 2021's softer cottagecore trend. So if cottagecore was sort of about a Disney princess vibe, goblin core is about Hobbit vibes. So we've moved away from princess toward Hobbit. Jacqueline in the chat is saying Spotify even has a genre for goblin core, which I am extremely interested in and will be checking out after this. Goblin core is about things being less pretty and less perfect. It's sort of a cozy mess vibe for goblin core. Goblin core saw a 395% growth in membership of their subreddit and 695% increase in Etsy searches related to goblin core over the last little while. And while there aren't any BISACs or subjects specific to goblin core, I think we should pay attention to the influence of the trend on other BISACs. Like mushrooms, topics like foraging, mending and making, and all of those similar topics could be related to the goblin core vibe shift and have crossover with some of the other trends we're talking about today, like sustainability, as Pavan mentioned, with all of those making and mending titles. That kind of also has roots in mushrooms and goblin core too. But back to mushrooms. Across fashion, home decor, wellness, and more, mushrooms are really having a moment, and the puns are immaculate. From va va shroom to you aren't tripping, the headlines around mushrooms' prominence in other retail areas have been incredible. Mushrooms have also been used to produce sustainable vegan leather alternatives for shoes, housewares, stationery products, and accessories. And vintage-inspired designs featuring mushrooms are in the top 10 most popular and trending designs on mobile accessories retailer Casetify and houseware seller Society 6. Mushrooms and mushroom motifs, particularly with a vintage edge, have been really prominent in all of these areas as well, which really ties us back as we trace the roots of mushrooms through the aesthetics takes us to nostalgia core, which Pavan's going to talk about.
So I think of all the cores, this has definitely got to be my favorite. According to Aesthetics Wiki, most senses of nostalgia focus on childhood, teenagehood, TV shows, movies, music, snacks, trends, fashion, video games, and other forms of technology, hangout places such as malls, books, comics, and many other things.
Sorry,
If you're
Pavan,
wondering,
for the interpreter, could you make that list again?
sure, yeah.
Thank you.
So nostalgia focuses on childhood and teenagehood TV shows, movies, music, snacks, trends, fashion, video games, and other forms of technology, and hangout places such as malls, hello, Stranger Things, books, comics, and many other things. And if you're wondering about all of the other aesthetics, I would highly recommend checking out Aesthetics Wiki. All right, so in its most purest form, nostalgia core is about immersing oneself in the music, in the movies, in the trends from a certain period of time. We're currently seeing a revival of the 80s and 90s. You can see it on shows like Stranger Things, that 90s show, Young Sheldon, Fresh Off the Boat, Riverdale, and there's so many more. We're also seeing a music revival. So not only in new music that sounds like old music, but old music is becoming new again. So we're seeing a lot of Spotify lists that include old music that the newer generation thinks is new music.
My favorite nostalgia core show is Yellow Jackets right now. I'm just going to throw that out there. Do you have a favorite?
I'm definitely a big fan of Stranger Things, but yeah, it's interesting how things are taking on a lot of nostalgia core into pop culture. That's where we're seeing it the most. And as you can see, people are hungry for nostalgia core. We're seeing a lot of the 80s and 90s, and we're going to see a lot more of it thanks to pop culture. We're going to see the new Barbie movie coming out. So that in itself will be a niche of its own called Barbie core. But a lot of the 90s will be at the forefront this year.
Yeah, I'm really interested too. This is a difficult trend to tackle in BIZAC because BIZAC is so subject focused. What would be interesting is kind of looking at whether there's a lot of appetite for books, particularly in YA and new adult, that are set in the 90s and early 2000s. I think a lot of what we're seeing in pop culture really reflects that. It'll be interesting to see if there's appetite for that or growing numbers of books in those categories. I kind of wonder too, if there was a 90s or 2000s era category for historical fiction or historical romance, would we see it growing? As much as it ages me to say that the 90s and 2000s should count as historical subjects, I think it would be interesting to see what that looks like.
That's definitely a neat idea.
BIZAC committee, let's make it happen.
All right, so clutter core. Guys, we get to be messy this year. This is a trend on the rise, and it's okay to be messy, and it's okay to be imperfect. And this is what cluttercore is. So at the heart of cluttercore, it's about comfort and finding things that make you happy. And for Molly Ruck, what makes her happy is copious amounts of plants, small objects, and all the art you can get your hands on. But that necessarily won't be the case for everyone. And the thing is, a lot of people will see it as clutter, but for you, it's about a treasure trove of things you love and that bring you comfort. And of course, most of this came during the pandemic when people were looking for things that gave them comfort, that gave them familiarity in a time that was really scary. And so we're continuing to see this trend grow. I thought it was really interesting that if anyone is familiar with The Sims, that whether you're playing it on a PC or on PlayStation, they introduced a clutter kit that people can use to place in the homes that they build. So it's about making things homey, about giving comfort, and it is a anti-minimalism trend that is continuing to grow.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too when we think back to some of the other aesthetics we've talked about today. Goblin core is also about mess. Everything's a little bit about mess this year.
They definitely all tie in. That is true.
And if you have copious amounts of plants, maybe you have a mushroom or two. Animal Crossing New Horizons is peak cluttercore from the chat. Incredible. I feel like once it's made it into a video game, you know it's really happening.
Yeah.
What's interesting when we talk about the growth of cluttercore is that, of course, there's no BISAC subject for clutter, but there is a BISAC subject for organizing. And after 7 years of record-breaking sales in the cleaning, caretaking, and organizing category, 2022 was the lowest year by miles. It's down 64% over last year. So it's important to note, sort of like when we talked about personal finance earlier in the presentation, that sometimes a trend is indicated by the absence of something. Often a new trend like maximalism may not have a related BISAC category, but looking at what you might see as the opposite BISAC category can help you see if sales are waning, which might indicate that the consumer's appetite has changed. And I think that might be part of what we're seeing here in the organizing category. That's a really significant drop in a short amount of time. Pavan, do you want to talk about Marie Kondo?
Sure. I'll start off with talking about the hashtag cluttercore and how it gained its popularity. We saw it prominently on TikTok, and it received over 80.5 million views, and those views are still growing. Cluttercore, of course, is a cousin to maximalism, and what we found is that Marie Kondo's Karachi at Home is very deeply connected to cluttercore. She just recently announced that she's not as neat as she used to be, and what we're seeing is that it ties into what works for your life. And this is just one of the titles that we're seeing come out based on this concept, but we will see this concept in other categories of cleaning and organizing, especially parenting, where we're seeing that there is this shift for parents to ease that pressure, and they don't have to be perfect. It's about embracing imperfectness, that it's okay to be imperfect. We'll also see this concept shift over to home design and a lot of self-help titles.
Yeah, I think, Pavan, you're onto something here with the decline of organizing and the rise of cluttercore. We might see some of those changes reflected in the psychology and self-help BISACs. Last year, we talked about how, kind of despite mental wellness and self-improvement being really popular subjects, psychology was up 34% last year, but self-help was flat, growing just 1%. And I think it's interesting to look at self-help rather than psychology in relation to cluttercore, because sort of if we're looking at imperfection, that doesn't necessarily have to come from a scientist. These can be sort of more garden variety self-help titles. And back in 2021, we looked at the presence of swearing in the titles of self-help books. So in 2018, 14% of self-help titles had swear words in the title, and they accounted for 48% of sales in the category. In 2021, 7% of self-help titles had swear words, and they accounted for 9% of sales. So in 2021, we were moving away from more kind of conversational self-help and towards books that really had a strong connection to science and psychology. But in self-help psychology and the sort of homekeeping, house and home section, rising bestsellers show a lot of trends around embracing our imperfections, including Brené Brown's Imperfect, Megan Devine's It's Okay That You're Not Okay, Bittersweet by Susan Cain, Present Not Perfect by Amy Chase, How to Keep House While Drowning by Casey Davis, and The Clutter Connection by Cassandra Arson. All of these titles are rising in popularity, and they all focus a lot on it being okay to not be perfect, allowing those flaws to rise to the surface and embracing them. And I think what's interesting, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong on this, Pavan, that all the trends and cores that we've talked about today are about embracing some form of imperfection, whether it's about the sort of visible mending and showing the imperfections of your makes and garments, whether it's about goblin core or clutter core and keeping a messy home and embracing your creature comforts. It looks like 2022 heading into 2023, all we want to do is be comfortable and a little bit messy.
That's quite true. Being imperfect is a lot more sustainable than being perfect all the time.
Yes, I agree. So this is shaping up to be a very interesting year in the world of book sales. I can't wait to see how many new aesthetics exist next year. I think we're going to throw it to the audience now for questions. Let me just pop open my list of questions here. Okay. Oh, here's a good one. If clutter core is a reversal of the KonMari method of yore, cottage core a reversal of mid-century modern, what are the trends of today you'd most like to see a reversal of in 2024 and beyond? Wow.
That is a good question.
Monique, could you repeat the question, please? Thank you.
I sure can. If clutter core is a reversal of the KonMari method of yore, and that's for those not in the know, Marie Kondo's method of organizing. Cottage core, if that's a reversal of mid-century modern, what are the trends of today that you'd most like to see a reversal of in 2024 and beyond? That gave me a lot of time to try to think of an answer also.
It's a tough question.
It is really tough. I think actually the direction we're seeing things moving towards embracing imperfections, the way that the aesthetics work, where sort of you're finding an individual niche and it's a little bit more varied, I think that's really interesting and leaves a lot of space for people to, find their people and express their individuality. And I think that's a nice reversal compared to some of what we've previously seen in some of these genres where it's very aspirational and highly perfection based. What do you
That's
think,
true.
Pavan?
It has been nice to see some of the clutter core titles. I know previously we were seeing clutter free, and now it's the opposite, which is kind of nice to have.
Oh, this is interesting. My colleague Tom made a quick check of keywords in our bibliographic database, BiblioShare, and found 23 entries with Goblin Core and 195 with Cottage Core and 0 with Clutter Core. So Clutter Core book publishers, get on that with your keywords. Okay.
That's true. Cottage core has been around for a lot longer. I think it first made its introduction in 2020, and then it kind of became a huge thing in 2021. I think there's a Vogue article out there that discusses it.
Okay. Here's a good question. If once we're seeing the trend, do you think trying to produce a book that connects to it will be too late to jump on the bandwagon? How can publishers respond quickly to emerging trends?
I don't think so, because I think originally what we were talking about were modern mystic titles. So that had to do with tarot. So all that came first, and we didn't exactly have the books to respond to that. So a lot of our accounts like to merge things together. So sometimes I honestly think it's just a peek into what the future has to hold. So that is what Gift is doing. There's still more to come.
Yeah, I think that's a great point for you to say that your retailers want to merch, like if there's gift item in the category, they want books that kind of tie in with that. And that's really interesting. I think something else to think about is that it's not just about the books you haven't published yet, but about looking at your backlist and seeing what you have already that might benefit from being repositioned. This might be a great opportunity to slap a new cover on an old dark fantasy novel and, throw a little money at it and see if that works. If you have books about, I'm just going to stop my slide share here. If you have books about cluttercore or about embracing your imperfections, that might be a really great resource to start sharing so that people can rediscover those titles that may not have been sort of right for their original moment. Publishers, the greatest asset that you have is your intellectual property. You may already own books that fit into some of these trends. So repositioning those may be a great quick win for you. This is another great related question. Any trends you might think would be durable versus any that might be flash in the pan? That's tough.
That's a good question, though.
I think something to think about, and we've talked about this a little bit, is like originally we started by talking about mushrooms. And that was something, Pavan, that you mentioned when we talked. You came and spoke with us at BookNet months and months and months ago and mentioned mushrooms offhand. And that sent us on this journey to discover the cores and everything else. So I think what's interesting about that is if you look at the overarching theme of all of these things, Goblin Core might be over next year, but coziness and embracing imperfections and the grittier side of life might not.
That's true. I do think it's important to note, like, were there titles and were there gift products relating to this category before the trend occurred? And I feel like if they were there originally, then it's a little more sustainable. But I see there's a non-believer in the chat, and they don't think mushrooms will be popular as much any longer. But that's interesting. I mean, it could be true. We'll never know until it actually happens.
Prognosticating is difficult.
Yeah.
This is a great technical question. If these categories don't belong to any BISAC, how did you run these analysis? That's a really great question. I can take that as the person who ran a lot of the graphs. I think you have to, like I mentioned when we talked about organizing, you have to think if it doesn't exist, what are the categories that are related? And if there's nothing that's related, what are the opposites? And then you kind of try to frame it that way. You can also look for searches of items that you think are sort of emblematic of that trend, and then look at what categories those books use. That can kind of help you discover where you might want to focus your searches if you're using subject level analysis. There's also Google Trends is great because you can look at search term popularity over time, and that can help you kind of understand if something's really trendy or if your particular social media algorithms have been pointing you in a direction that may not be widely popular. I have a great question for you, Pavan. Are you seeing the physical aesthetic of books and products respond to these trends? Does book cover design express a cottagecore aesthetic outside of the home decor and organizing subjects on books completely unrelated?
So are they asking if like the book covers reflect these trends?
Yeah, like are you seeing items that are maybe not specific to the trend, like carry the aesthetic of a trend? Like, are you seeing like goblin core looking journals or cottage core looking romance novels?
I will say I've seen a certain Goblin Core, and I won't mention which title it is, but I did see one about Goblin Core, and it didn't really capture like the heart of what Goblin Core is. So I guess it kind of jumped on the popularity of that concept.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think your hint too about the Taylor Swift folklore album aesthetic influencing a lot of aesthetic choices has come through in gift and stationery as well. It's interesting to see that.
It was also interesting to like see that some of her clothing choices, like her plaid clothing choices that she has in there, kind of branch off into nostalgia core. So we're seeing that 90s look. So it's really cool to see how all of these topics are interrelated and how trends are more connected than you would think they are separate.
Yeah, I just saw a great question pop up, and this is something we won't be able to answer now, but we will have to keep track of over time. With cluttercore on the rise, are we seeing physical book sales increase? Really interesting question. I think the implication here is that books are going to be part of people's maximalist clutter. I don't think that's a bad idea to look at. And I think what'll be interesting is looking over the next year to see how the market performs. We at BookNet have lots of newsletters and tools that will help you follow that as the year moves along. So do subscribe to our newsletters, or if you're a user of our products, continue using them to track that over time. But I think that's a great point that book sales may increase quite a bit if people are trying to maximize their living space. And I think I'll close off with maybe the hardest question on the list. What other weird trends do you think we'll see by next year? This is so tricky.
We'll see a lot more of cluttercore. So that's so new. I mean, there isn't a BISAC for cluttercore. So we're going to start with the concept of cluttercore across all categories. So I think we're going to see some interesting and cool things that we may have not seen before, but that concept will be trending and translating across all categories in 2023 and even into 2024.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something to watch. I'm really interested in books set in that nostalgia core time period. We're seeing a lot of shows set in the 90s and early 2000s. Turning Red, I think, was another great recent example of like recent history nostalgia core. And I'm curious to see if we see that in some of the young adult fiction, new adult, some of those areas, to see if books in those time periods are popular. Again, very difficult to track with BISAC, but I'm curious to see if that happens. That's my little future prediction.
Same. I'll let you know if I come across anything. I feel like that idea is out there, so it will happen. It'll manifest.
Amazing. Yes. Now that we've put it out into the world, I'm hoping
it's going to happen.
That it happens. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us and giving us your time this afternoon as we talk about trends. If you have questions we couldn't answer, feel free to reach out to us at BookNet, and we can make sure Pavan and I get your questions and do our best to answer them as best we can. There will be a survey in the chat that you can fill out to let us know if you found this useful and how your technical experience of the session was. Thank you again, Pavan, so much for joining me today. It's such a pleasure to talk to you and benefit from your expertise and your insights into the woolly world of gift, which we at BookNet don't get to spend a lot of time in.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be able to talk about gift with other like-minded gifties out there.
The best. Yeah, so our contact information is in the chat, and we hope you all have a wonderful afternoon and best of luck selling books in 2023. Thanks, everybody.